Good morning, everybody. My name is Ken Wu. I am the Executive Director of Corporate Sustainability at Gilead Sciences. I have the distinct honor and pleasure of being the chair of this session on ESG, the role of culture and technology in moving pledges to practice. Environmental, social, and governance issues probably came to the business lexicon probably back in 2004. And that started conversations about how companies are faced with potential challenges from the environmental, social, or corporate governance areas. Over time, specific ESG issues, for example, climate change as highlighted by the Paris Accord to address climate global warming, or international meetings where healthcare systems, national healthcare systems are demanding pharma, life care, health sciences organizations to provide a net zero green product to their systems in 2045 or 2050. So as a backdrop of these external pressures or external interests on companies, many companies have started to acknowledge that these impacts may have something on their business, and they have to address their resiliencies against these risks. So over time, you would see a lot of companies starting to make acknowledgments that they have these risks, and now more importantly, they're starting to make pledges about how they're going to address these risks and achieve their ESG ambitions. What's on the table, though, is that there are so many businesses, large and small, across multiple industries making these pledges. The question comes, are these pledges just PR statements? Or are they true aspirations with concrete actions that will drive their business to perform to safeguard this one shared privileged earth that we all get to live on? So today we will be exploring how culture coupled with technology can help drive companies to achieve their ESG ambitions. To start off this track, it is my pleasure to bring up Joydeep Ganguly as our first speaker, and he is a recognized sustainability leader. Joydeep Ganguly is the Senior Vice President for Corporate Operations at Gilead Sciences. In his current role, he is accountable for several strategic functions, including corporate engineering, capital and infrastructure strategy, corporate real estate, operations and risk management, and lastly, global procurement. Joydeep also serves as Gilead's Chief Sustainability Officer, which he is accountable for how Gilead globally addresses its environmental sustainability strategy. Joydeep has a master's in electrical engineering from University of Notre Dame, an MBA from North Carolina State University, and an MHA from Cornell University. He was recognized as one of the top 50 leaders in California by the National Diversity Council. He was a recipient of the Leadership Excellence Award from the California Diversity Council, and he was recently recognized as a top 3 leader in climate sciences within the biotech space. So I could not think of anyone better to kick off this session than Joydeep, who will talk about practical things that have been done to drive ESG at Gilead. Joydeep?
All right, so the translation of my bio basically is that I take credit for Ken's work. That's pretty much how it is. So I have a 20-minute presentation that I hope to get through in about 8 to 12 minutes, and hopefully I will make up some time that we lost with the extraordinary keynotes out here. But before I do, I will start and end on a personal note, and everything else in the middle is going to be extraordinarily operational. Anita Manvani, who I know very well, called me up about TiEcon last year, and she was like, well, what should we do? What should we do? What she didn't know was she was calling me up when I was in the ER with my 9-year-old son, who was a chronic asthmatic. And we actually bought a home in Pack Heights because it was the closest space to the ER, the best pediatric ER out there. We, as my wife and I, we got apathetic to the fact that during the summer season, he will be the ER 9 times over the summer. That's pretty much the random number right now. And I was actually literally with my son at the ER, and it really bothered me how comfortable he was there. He went in there, went to the room, met his favorite nurse, played with his toys, put the nebulizer on, put the albuterol on 0.8 milligrams per liter, stressed it out for 4 hours, and he said, this is my life, right? Anita was like, hey, listen, you guys are doing such amazing work in healthcare. What do you want to speak on? And I said, are we doing amazing work in healthcare? We basically have unmet medical needs, and I'll give you my end, and I'll end with the same note. We discover medical needs that are required. We discover drugs. We build gigantic, beautiful plants that win every Facility of the Year award, that creates more emissions, that creates more diseases, that we then discover more medical needs for, right? And the question I ask myself is, when does this break? When does the cycle break? And I asked Anita, this is TiEcon. I'm a technology geek. I went to school with half the people here. I said, would there be interest to try and take this to a bit of a social elevated level? Because if there is a place that I find where technology can disrupt the equation, it is actually in the ESG space. I am not a climate science leader. I got nominated as top 3 climate scientists because Nicole and Ken do amazing work, and it just is that they want my face. I will say this to you. I am an operations leader. And our CEO was very intentional on where he put sustainability, was he kept it in operations, because his view was very simple. You cannot be incentivized just on innovation. Innovation at the mercy of the planet doesn't work for us. And that was a huge, huge thing for me, because it changed my entire ecosystem. So what I'm going to talk about in the next few minutes is a practitioner playbook, right? And my hope is not to leave you inspired. My hope actually is to leave you a little bit pissed off, a little bit upset with the fact that we are basically creating a world where we are more worried about today than tomorrow. And I hope that if nothing else, you all leave with the notion that tomorrow ESG is not a green activist agenda. It is not a social activism agenda. It is fundamental to how we will survive as a civilization. And if that pissed off nature leads to action, job well done. If nothing else, I have some really cool slides, so just enjoy the slides, right? So, all right, fantastic. So, talk a little bit about sustainability at Gilead, our playbook. Ken talked about the progress of a PR, our playbook in practice. Where I'm going to spend most of my time is the unexploited potential of digital and Pharma 4.0 in ESG. I have 6 offline meetings just after this, and I've chosen them very carefully with leaders that I think could disrupt Gilead's ESG equation by infusing digital technologies. And I would encourage all of you to think that way, right? So in general, sustainability at Gilead, our vision is to create a better, healthier world for everybody. We focus on health equity, people, innovation, environment. Our playbook is fundamental around the fact that we basically have a playbook that focuses on ensuring a burning platform, standards-based sustainability, forging innovative partnerships, measuring progress consistently, and the most important thing that I'm going to spend most of my time on is right now the promise of digital. Let me start off with our fundamental mission. How many CEOs of Fortune 100 companies do you think have the word sustainability in their corporate mission? It's a very easy answer. It's 1. When Gilead came up, when our CEO, and Ken and Nicole keep me honest here, when Gilead came up with I was part of the 17-person team that helped our CEO develop corporate strategy. His 3 corporate strategy is 10 transformative therapies by 2030, 33% of our revenue by oncology. We are, by the way, for those folks that don't know us, we are a virology company that works in unmet medical diseases. We are most well known for Veklury that helped the patients during the pandemic, but we helped also reduce HIV, not to a death sentence, cured Hep C, and now are focusing on cell therapy and oncology. But The third tranche of his vision was to increase shareholder value in a responsible and sustainable fashion. Real estate on a CEO slide is very, very expensive, right? He is held to shareholders, he is held to fundamental stake constituents, and the fact that we actually at Gilead have our CEO subscribing to this in terms of not just climate action, but responsibility and sustainability are both part of the corporate mission. That to me is the first step of a playbook, right? Figure out how you actually get sustainability into a corporate mantra. Most people talk about it because it sounds cool, right? But very few people actually are willing to invest in it as a way of life. And the first part of my playbook, if someone woke me up at 2 in the morning, and I have an 9-year-old and a 6-year-old, so I wake up at the 2 in the morning very often, and shook me up and said, what was the one thing that separates Gilead, or what is the one reason why you believe Gilead made most progress? It is not about the charisma of my sustainability practitioners. It is not about digital. It is not about Pharma 4.0. It is the fact that our CEO believes you can do well by doing good. And that ethos, when it permeates in the organization, is super important. And why am I doing this is I probably am speaking to half a dozen CEOs here, right? It is extraordinarily important for you to recognize that as innovator companies, we are now picking our suppliers, not by cost of goods, not by economics, not by financials alone. We are picking them based on core values. I see our procurement leaders here in many spaces right now, and you know, the ESG and the social and fundamental moral compass that suppliers have is critically important. It's not because of Scope 3 compliance. It is because we just fundamentally believe that companies that share the same values with us will behave as though our company is theirs, and that's what we need. I won't spend much time here because the tenet one is about capital plan. I can talk chapter and verse about how much I spend on sustainability, but one of our playbook things was that this wasn't something that we were going to just do free. We were going to actually spend, you know, incredible capital on. But the one I want to spend some time on right now is the fact that sustainability at Gilead is not something we do as a hobby. We have built our standards. So if you talk to an engineer in our company, they would not know how to build they would not know how to design and engineer a non-sustainable asset because we don't have an SOP for that, right? And building a sustainable approach towards how we approach things is how we've sort of achieved what we have. The last part, and I think this will resonate right now, is also we've really forged innovative partnerships with suppliers, be it in terms of enrolling our suppliers in our journey. Category plans within procurement have sustainability criteria. We've applied sustainability not just as a criteria, but we've rewarded suppliers for actually going above. So while it might seem a very long-term investment, partners that actually have sustainability as part of their ethos are companies that get rewarded, not just by Gilead, by the way, by Genentech and the entire pharma industry. Where I want to spend most of my time right now is this. I have one preamble slide, and I'll spend 3 more slides on how we approach this. What I will say, and I'm super unpopular, by the way, amongst sustainability leaders. I am pretty sure they are going to ask me to be kicked off and replace me with Ken. And here's why. I do believe that on ESG, as an industry, and I speak for the biopharma, I'm not speaking about tech, I'm not speaking about the world, we've got pledge crazy. Everyone's pledging everything, right? Net zero by this, net zero by this, net zero by this. The hope is that most of us will leave the companies before the pledges come to life. That's the sad truth about it, right? And I say this not to be irreverent. I say this because when I look at the progress that we have actually made tangibly against most of the pledges, we are in a heavy PR era, right? A very low progress era. We just published our ESG report at Gilead, and the team has 13 pledges. We have pledges around environment and carbon, water, waste, and product, because we deem these to be material to our progress. One of my leaders came to me and said, Joydeep, here's the ESG report, and I said, this is all anecdotes. This reads like a fairy tale I would read my 6-year-old daughter. It sounds like everything is unicorns and happiness and everyone's doing well and we are leading our way through everything, lead platinum here, lead gold here. Have we actually reduced our emissions footprint against a fundamental analytical metric? And they're like, let's go back. And on 12 of them, we did. On one of them, we actually moved 166% backwards. They were like, well, we shouldn't publish that. And I said, we should. We should. And we did. Much to my CEO's consternation, because which operations leader likes to tell that our biggest success this year was that we actually didn't just move not forward, but we moved backwards at a very cool pace. We were 166% of our goal in water. And I didn't do that because I wanted to come across as this martyr. I did this because we need a common currency around how we measure progress. I'm going to meet 6 people right now, I mentioned this. Each of them is going to convince me that their tool will lead me to nirvana. Guarantee you. And it is only their tool, by the way, no one else's tool. It is their tool that will lead me to the haloed grail of net zero, faster, quicker, more efficient than anyone else. And I'm just going to ask them one question. Give me one position paper where you have practically done this. That's it. I want numbers. Consistent measurement is going to become the call of the day. So if anyone here is entrepreneurial, which I assume most of you are, tomorrow, sustainability as it stands is going to be something that CFOs and CEOs are going to be held against at a very analytical level. The sooner we can get to a common currency that we can measure ourselves with, the better. And I'm super proud of Gilead, right? Not because I've worked there. Right? We recruited a speaker from Bayer that has a CEO that believes in exactly the same thing. We have speakers from McKinsey and Kite and other companies that talk about this. It is fundamental to our common equation that we have a common currency. So when I put this in terms of a common playbook, I would ask each of you to subscribe to the fact that as we push towards a common goal of being better for the planet, better for health equity, better for social equity, we have this common dynamic. So I'll move very quickly to the final few slides around what's in our playbook. We have a thesis, and it's not indifferent to what most companies have, is that digital has been too often positioned as an efficiency play and not as an ESG play. And when we just finished 13 use cases on something called Lighthouse for us. We basically said, let's just invest money. We spent 20 million, Ken, on a suite of initiatives and said, let's pick the best partners, the best products. McKinsey helped us with this to say, could we develop a Lighthouse program where we just went ahead? The ironical part about it is we were trying to show the World Economic Forum how we were more productive in R&D. What we ended up showing them was, ironically, that a lot of the technologies that were productive for R&D were actually very sustainable. And this goes back to the fact that around doing well by doing good. We actually believe the power of digital, not just in terms of lowering. When I talk to IT folks, they're like, well, digital has to be sustainable because I'm going to the cloud, not data centers. And I'm like, that's good, that's step one. But what about in terms of smart tech and building management systems and fundamental energy management systems around the board right now? What are we doing in terms of trying to build that sort of ecosystem in there? And we have 3 use cases, right? We basically, I'll talk a little bit about them. And this slide I'm not going to spend on because this is my public affairs slide in terms of what we've achieved. But in terms of our use cases, right, we basically believe that as we take a look at Pharma 4.0, where the maturity model calls for greater transparency, greater control, greater predictability, we want to be able to leverage digital in real practical use cases. So we had 4 this year that disproportionately impacted our sustainability footprint, right? Be it in terms of reducing carbon footprint, using water neutrality as a basis, getting to the point where we have greater transparency around the landfill stuff, and as well as in terms of where we are in terms of our packaging. And the use cases range from things like, we are a pharma company, we make pills, capsules, biologics drug. Our biggest energy use is not what you see on papers, which is a gigantic plant making product that gets shipped out in a truck. Our biggest energy sink is the fact that 96% of what we work on fails. 96% of what we work on fails. So when we're developing a drug for asthma for my 9-year-old son, the chances are it will take 97 shots on goal to get it there. We focus our sustainability calculus on the 97th product that is commercially available. We do not focus it on the 96 shots on goal that don't make it, because it's experimental, right? So finding ways to get us to fail fast is not just good economics, it's not just good financials, it's not just good for the patient, it's bloody great for the planet, right? And that is what we did. I mean, from content uniformity is basically ensuring that, who's had a Tylenol before, by the way? Or Motrin, ibuprofen? No one? Great, most of you have. You'd be super upset if you opened a capsule and saw that one pill was more thicker than the other one. You'd worry about the quality. So content uniformity is not just important for quality, it actually is important for potency, right? And the ability to get the right content uniformity in terms of API, which is the active pharmaceutical ingredient particle size, it takes tons of experiments from our scientists to understand what is the right formulation to get us there. We use digital twins, Monte Carlo simulations, and basically reduce the number of experiments to get to the actual preferred uniformity. And by reducing it by 57%, it was great for us. CFO loved it because it meant that it was 57% more economical to get the product to fail faster. But eventually the planet benefited by not having the emissions associated with 57% more experiments that would take us to a point where we would have a drug that would eventually fail, right? So this is an example of, digital twins get used to, you can preventively maintain stuff, but most companies forget the fact that most of us in research, development, and innovator companies don't just work on commercially saleable drugs. A lot of our expenses and our climate GHG efforts are spent on clinical drugs. And the same thing in terms of digital twins for energy consumption, right? Figuring out ways where abnormal peak demands result in high cost of service, using ML models to predict optimized energy consumption, identifying abnormal gaps is a way to understand. Right now, no one goes ahead and just, all our maintenance schedules, by the way, in plants that are massive, are based on time. You will go every 3 months and maintain it. When you have 9.7 million square feet, 196 buildings, 94 sites, Drew Johnson from Bayer will come up here and his footprint is even bigger than ours, right? You can't, that's not sustainable. You've got people maintaining stuff that's in perfect condition, and you've got people ignoring stuff that's in bad condition. And getting to the point where you're predictive about where things are is a huge impact on the energy one. And using simple things like digital twins and saying, this doesn't make sense, are the energy consumption's just gone up, right? We should go and send someone to actually take a look at the HVAC, take a look at the belts, take a look at the fundamental operations. It is huge. And these things, while the currency to justify these business cases till now have been economics, they are soon changing to be carbon footprint. There will come a time where most of us will not get a travel budget in terms of dollars. We will get a travel budget in terms of carbon. AZ is already there, by the way. AstraZeneca is already there. And we will have to pick flights, and we will reward companies that use SAFs, sustainable aviation fuels, to actually lower their carbon footprint. And we will be shamed when most of us fly to Davos to talk about sustainability, by the way, while we have 75 private jets in Davos, right? And those days will come. Those days will come because the next generation is not going to be terrifically impressed by what we innovate on. They will be depressed by our footprint. And I won't talk about this example, which is lab occupancy. This is a simple one in terms of how we have very energy-intensive fume hoods, and just simple things like identifying occupancy against the actual, we have a PI vision system. PI is a data historian tool that Emerson sells right now in terms of visualizing what hoods are available, and if a scientist leaves the hood open, it consumes tremendous amounts of energy. The only reason I'm presenting these case studies, by the way, is not, this is a far more erudite audience than I normally speak to. Normally I speak to CEOs that have limited understanding of anything technical. But I wanted to let you know that the power of digital as it relates to making a dramatic impact on sustainability is not just real, it's almost incumbent on us. And eventually where I see the world going is, while everything in automation and digital today has been focused around a bias around efficiency, companies that actually focus on having an ESG bias in their automation are going to be the ones that thrive. Right, today, when I look at my automation system, it takes 96 days to make a biologic antibody. Rituxan, Humira, Trodelvy. 96 days from thaw till patient. Takes about 20 unit operations. Takes about $4.9 million. The only reason I know it is when we lose a batch, that's the amount I write off. $4.9 million, 96 days. Most of it is focused around ensuring that your batch gets made to a consistent specification. Tomorrow, and by tomorrow I don't mean 2025, I can 2030, 2040, wherever, not only will software be able, hopefully, to ensure that adaptive controls ensure that the batch is made to spec, but my hope is it'll also be catered to batches that actually have the lowest carbon footprint. And it can happen, right? We don't know how, but I'm meeting with Jensen very quickly to sort of say, hey, this could be a billion-dollar idea, right, for pharmaceuticals. We just don't think of it this way, because today the focus very much is near-term operations. I will end, hopefully I've done well, Ken. I will end with the final thoughts, right? 3 thoughts, right? And I'll end with this, right? I've already talked about this slide, right, which is that as an industry, it is incredibly easy for us to have a small sense of arrogance about the fact that we have a patient at the end of a supply chain, ergo everything we do is okay. If we have a disproportionate amount of emissions, it's okay because it's a patient, right? At some point in time, right, this entire life cycle of creating plants that eventually supply the drugs, that create more emissions, that create more diseases, has to stop. And I would argue that it should stop at my level. It should stop at the operations vector, right? It should not stop at research. We should allow research and development to prosecute as many drugs as possible. We should not create more unmet medical needs. And it happens if operations leaders subscribe to the fact that as researchers develop drugs and they develop therapies, we fundamentally have a very carbon neutral, water neutral, energy neutral way of getting those drugs to patients. That's my point 1, right? That operations vector is super important to me. My legacy is not what my manager thinks of me. My legacy is what my children will think of me. At the end of it, they will look at me and hopefully not tell me that all you did for 42 years of working was balance a budget or manage the scope of responsibilities Ken talked about. They will hopefully say, you allowed the impossible to happen, create therapies that made the world better, but you did it in a responsible, sustainable manner. Right? So I'll leave you with that second point. This is not about a motivational speech on legacy. And I will leave you with one final point. Healthcare, biopharmaceuticals, and I would argue tech. We're incented to compete because we believe everything is a zero-sum game. On this, we should collaborate. The planet will not care who achieved net zero first. We shouldn't either. The planet, however, will care who achieves net zero last. And we should too. On that note, I appreciate the patience, I appreciate your engagement, and I will turn it over to Ken, and hopefully this wasn't too much of a preaching session, but I wanted to start this keynote off. The good news, I forgot to mention this to you when I started off, was the speakers get increasingly better with time. So there are some extraordinary speakers that Ken's curated, so you will get to hear about how things work in practice. But I just felt it incumbent on me for the podium and the space that Anita and the TiEcon board gave me to at least drive a little bit of a passion around the space. And hopefully, when I talk about collaboration, I genuinely mean it, which is why I'm able to call on people from other companies who will willingly participate, because it is something where we should unite on that front. With that note, thank you again, Ken, for the time, thank you for the space, and thank you for the energy.